He thought his $3,000 pinstripe suit and his family name gave him the right to sneer at a single black mother. Attorney Samuel Vance didn't just want to win the custody case. He wanted to humiliate Neera Thompson. He mocked her job, her neighborhood, and her dignity, thinking the courtroom was his private country club. But he made one fatal mistake. He forgot who was sitting on the bench. In a moment that silenced the entire room, Judge Beatrice Calloway didn't just overrule him. She dismantled his entire career in seconds flat. You are not going to believe the karma that hit this man. The air in courtroom 4B tasted like stale coffee and floor wax, but to Neera Thompson, it tasted like fear. She sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned the color of ash. She was wearing her Sunday best, a navy blue skirt suit she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for job interviews. It was clean, pressed, and respectable, but seated across the aisle from her ex-husband, Greg, and his attorney, she felt small. Greg Miller looked different. He was wearing a suit that Neera knew he couldn't afford, likely paid for by his new fiancé's parents. But it was the man next to him who sucked the oxygen out of the room, Samuel P. Vance. Even the name sounded expensive. Vance was a man who took up space. He spread his files across the defense table like he was conquering territory. He was known in the city not just for his win record, but for his brutality. He didn't just beat opponents, he evicted them from their dignity. He was 50, silver-haired, with a tan that spoke of midwinter vacations in the Caribbean, and eyes that looked at Neera as if she were a smudge on his Italian leather loafers. Neera glanced at her own attorney, David Russo. David was young, barely 30, with a suit that was a little too large in the shoulders. He was a legal aid lawyer, overworked and underpaid, but he had a kindness in his eyes that Neera clung to. "Just breathe, Neera," David whispered, leaning in. "Stick to the facts. You're a good mother. The best. That's all that matters." "I know," Neera whispered back, her voice trembling. "But look at him. Vance looks like he's already celebrating." "Vance is a bully," David said, though his own nervous shuffling of papers betrayed him. "Bullies hate it when you don't flinch." The bailiff's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs of the gallery. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Beatrice Calloway presiding." The side door swung open, and the room went silent. Judge Calloway walked in with a stride that demanded attention. She was a black woman in her early 60s, with salt and pepper hair pulled back into a severe bun and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had smelled every lie ever told in this county. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked at the files. "Be seated," she said, her voice a low contralto that carried without shouting. Neera sat, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. The custody hearing for her 6-year-old son, Malik. Greg had been absent for 4 years, surfacing only when his new girlfriend decided she wanted to play house and needed a ready-made child to complete the picture. They were suing for full custody, citing Neera's instability. "Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. Thompson versus Miller. Petition for modification of custody." Judge Calloway looked over her glasses. "I've reviewed the motions. Mr. Vance, you are representing the petitioner, Mr. Miller. You may proceed with your opening." Samuel Vance stood up. He didn't just stand. He uncoiled. He buttoned his jacket with a slow, deliberate movement, checked his expensive watch, and walked to the center of the floor. He didn't look at the judge. He turned his body slightly, angling himself toward Neera, letting his gaze rake over her cheap suit. "Your Honor," Vance began, his voice smooth like oiled gravel. "This case is not about love. Both parents claim to love the child. This case is about capacity. It is about the fundamental ability to provide a civilized, safe, and appropriate environment for a young boy with potential. He paused, letting the word civilized hang in the air. It was a dog whistle so loud it might as well have been a siren. My client, Mr. Miller, resides in the Hillsdale district, Vance continued, referencing one of the most affluent, predominantly white suburbs in the state. He offers a home with a backyard, a top-tier school district, and a stable two-parent household. Ms. Thompson, on the other hand. Vance turned fully to face nearer now. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark's grin. Resides in the Lower East Side, a neighborhood known for, let's call it, colorful nighttime activities. She works long, erratic hours as a nurse's aide. She relies on a patchwork system of neighbors and relatives to watch the boy. Is this malice? No. It is simply a lack of resources, a lack of cultural fit for the aspirations we should have for this child. Neera felt the heat rise up her neck. Cultural fit? Mr. Vance, Judge Calloway said, her voice cutting through his monologue. She hadn't looked up from her notes. Skip the geography lesson. What are your grounds for full custody? Poverty is not a crime in this court. Vance chuckled, a condescending sound that grated on Neera's nerves. Of course not, Your Honor. But negligence is. We intend to prove that Ms. Thompson's lifestyle is inherently dangerous to the child. Not just because of where she lives, but because of how she lives. He walked back to his table, leaning down to whisper something to Greg, who snickered. David stood up for the defense opening. He was shaky. Your Honor, Neera Thompson has raised Malik alone for 4 years while Mr. Miller was nowhere to be found. She works hard. She is a loving, dedicated mother. To uproot the child now would be traumatizing. We shall see, Vance said loudly from his seat. Order, Calloway snapped. Call your first witness, Mr. Vance. I call the respondent, Neera Thompson, to the stand. Neera's stomach dropped. She stood up, her legs feeling like lead, and walked to the witness box. She swore to tell the truth. She sat down, gripping the arms of the chair. Vance approached her. He didn't bring a notepad. He wanted her to look at him, to be intimidated by his presence. Ms. Thompson, he began, you work at St. Jude's Hospital, correct? Yes, sir. I'm a CNA. A certified nursing assistant, Vance corrected, emphasizing the assistant. So you change bedpans, you wash patients. It's grueling work, isn't it? It's honest work, Neera said, her voice stronger than she expected. I take care of people who can't take care of themselves. Noble, Vance waved his hand dismissively. But the hours. You work nights sometimes. Yes. The night shift pays a differential. I need the money for Malika's school supplies and... So you leave your son alone at night? Vance interrupted, his voice booming. No, Neera shot back. My mother stays with him, or my aunt. Vance smirked. Ah, the village. Tell me, Ms. Thompson, does your aunt have a criminal record? Neera froze. Her Aunt Sheila had a shoplifting charge from 20 years ago. That was decades ago. Yes or no, Ms. Thompson? Yes, but... So you leave your son in the care of a known criminal while you work nights to scrape by in a neighborhood where the crime rate is 3 times the national average. Vance turned to the judge, spreading his hands. Your Honor, this is exactly what I mean. It's a chaotic, unsafe environment. It's a characteristic of that demographic. Judge Calloway's head snapped up. The glare she shot Vance could have melted steel. Mr. Vance, tread carefully. I am simply stating facts, Your Honor, Vance said, feigning innocence. Facts about the environment Miss Thompson insists on keeping the child in. He turned back to Neera. Let's talk about your personal life, Neera. Who are these men you bring around the house? I don't bring men around, Neera said, shocked. I haven't dated anyone since Greg left. Really? Vance picked up a piece of paper from his table. We have an affidavit from a neighbor who claims she sees different men coming and going from your apartment at all hours. That's a lie, Neera cried out, looking at Greg. Greg looked down at the table. My brother comes over to fix things. My cousin brings groceries. Those are my family. Family, Vance sneered. It's always a sprawling, undefined family with you people, isn't it? Hard to keep track of who is who. Hard to know who is safe. Objection, David yelled, jumping up. Your Honor, this is prejudicial and racist. Sustained, Calloway said, her voice icy. Mr. Vance, move on. Now. Vance didn't look chastised. He looked bored. Very well. Ms. Thompson, look at Mr. Miller. Look at his suit. Look at the life he can offer. Don't you think Malik deserves a chance to get out of the ghetto? Don't you think he deserves to be raised by people who understand how the world actually works? Neera looked at Vance. Tears pricked her eyes, not from sadness, but from a rage so hot it burned. Mr. Vance, Neera said, her voice shaking but loud. My son is happy. He is loved. He doesn't need a backyard. He needs his mother. He needs a future. Vance shot back, leaning over the railing, invading her space. And frankly, looking at you, looking at your hands, looking at your situation, you can't give him one. You're breeding him for failure. It's in the blood, isn't it? The courtroom gasped. Judge Calloway slammed her gavel down so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Vance, in my chambers. Now, both counsel. Vance straightened his jacket, looking at Neera with a look of pure disdain. The truth hurts, doesn't it? He whispered to her before turning to follow the judge. Neera sat in the witness box, trembling. She looked at Greg. He was smiling. A small, victorious smile. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken her. But Neera Thompson wasn't broken, and she noticed something Vance hadn't. When Judge Calloway stood up, she hadn't just taken her notepad. She had taken the court transcript with her. The recess lasted 20 minutes. To Neera, it felt like 20 years. She sat at the table, David Russo beside her, looking pale. He's trying to bait you, David said, wiping sweat from his forehead. He wants you to have an outburst. He wants to prove you're emotional and unstable. It's a classic strategy for guys like him. He called my family criminals, Neera hissed. He said I'm breeding Malik for failure. I know, David said, and the judge heard it. Calloway doesn't play that game. Doesn't she? Neera looked at the empty bench. Vance plays golf with the mayor. I saw his picture in the paper last week at a charity gala. These people, they stick together. The door to the chambers opened. Judge Calloway emerged, her face an unreadable mask of stone. Vance followed, looking slightly annoyed but still arrogant. He adjusted his silk tie as he sat down, whispering something to Greg that made the ex-husband chuckle again. Back on the record, Calloway said. Mr. Vance, you have 5 more minutes with this witness. I suggest you use them wisely. And I suggest you remember which century we are living in. Vance stood up, unfazed. He believed he was untouchable. He had won cases with far less evidence and far more bias than this. He walked back to the witness stand. Ms. Thompson, Vance said, his tone shifting from aggression to a patronizing mock pity. Let's put aside the cultural differences for a moment. Let's talk about finances. You made $32,000 last year. Is that correct? Yes. And your rent is $1,200 a month, after taxes, utilities, food. The math doesn't work, does it? You're drowning. I make it work, Neera said. We don't go hungry. But you're one paycheck away from the street, Vance pressed. If you get sick, if you lose that job, Malik is homeless. Mr. Miller earns 6 figures. He has a savings account for Malik's college already. You can't even afford a savings account, can you? I save what I can. Pennies, Vance scoffed. Let's be real. You're holding on to the boy for your own emotional need, not for his benefit. You're being selfish. You want him to grow up in a struggle because that's all you know. It's a cycle. And you're terrified that if he goes to live with his father, he'll realize that there is a better way to live. A white way to live, perhaps? The gallery murmured again. Vance didn't say the color, but he implied it with every inflection. Better. Cleaner. Smarter. Objection, David shouted. Argumentative. Sustained, Calloway said. Mr. Vance, move to the evidence or sit down. I have one more question, Vance said. He leaned in, close to Neera. Miss Thompson, we ran a background check on your brother, the one who fixes things, Jamal Thompson. He has a DUI from 2018. Is this the man driving your son to school? Neera blinked. He made a mistake years ago. He's sober now. He helps me. A drunk driving your son? Vance turned to the judge. Your Honor, the pattern is undeniable. The mother is surrounded by criminality and poverty. She is bringing the child down. I move for an emergency temporary order to remove the child from her custody immediately, pending the final ruling. The boy is in danger tonight. Neera's heart stopped. Tonight? Greg hasn't seen him in 4 years, she screamed, forgetting to be calm. He doesn't even know Malik's favorite color. He doesn't know he's allergic to peanuts. I'm sure the nanny can handle allergies, Vance said dismissively. At least the nanny won't be a convicted felon. That is enough. Judge Calloway's voice was like a thunderclap. Vance turned, looking bored. I am simply zealously representing my client, Your Honor. You are zealously testing my patience, Counselor, Calloway said. Sit down. Vance smirked at Neera and returned to his seat. He looked at Greg and gave a subtle thumbs up. He thought he had done it. He had painted Neera as an angry, poor, black woman surrounded by criminals, and Greg as the white knight savior. Mr. Russo, Calloway said. Cross-examination? David stood up. He looked nervous, but he picked up a file. No questions for Ms. Thompson, Your Honor, but I would like to call our first witness, a surprise witness. We just received the affidavit this morning, and the individual agreed to come in. Vance rolled his eyes. Objection. Surprise witnesses must be disclosed 48 hours in advance. It goes to immediate credibility and impeachment of the petitioner, Your Honor, David argued. It's vital. Calloway looked at Vance, then at David. I'll allow it. Who is the witness? I call Elena Rosales to the stand. At the defense table, Greg Miller went pale. He grabbed Vance's arm. Samuel! He hissed. Samuel, that's... Vance frowned, looking at his client. Who is she? She was our housekeeper, Greg whispered, panic rising in his voice. From last year, the one we fired. So? A disgruntled employee, Vance whispered back. I'll destroy her in 2 minutes. Relax. The courtroom doors opened, and a small woman in her 40s walked in. She looked terrified. She clutched a purse to her chest. She took the stand, and was sworn in. David Russo approached her gently. Ms. Rosales, you worked for Mr. Miller and his fiancée, correct? Yes, Elena said, her voice quiet. For 8 months. And why did you leave? I didn't leave. I was fired. Why? Elena looked at Greg, then at Vance. She took a deep breath. Because I refused to lie. Vance shot up. Objection! Hearsay! Relevance! Overruled, Calloway said, leaning forward. The witness will answer. Lie about what? David asked. Mr. Miller. And him. She pointed a shaking finger at Vance. They had a meeting in the living room, about 3 months ago. Mr. Vance came over for drinks. I was serving appetizers. And what did you hear? Elena looked directly at Neera. Mr. Miller told the lawyer that he didn't really want full custody. He said the boy would be a hassle. He said he just wanted to stop paying child support because he wanted to buy a boat. Gasps erupted in the gallery. Neera covered her mouth. And what did Mr. Vance say? David asked. Elena paused. She looked at Vance, who was now glaring at her with a look that promised retribution. Mr. Vance laughed, Elena said clearly. He said, don't worry, Greg. We don't actually have to raise the kid. We just have to win. We'll paint the mother as a ghetto queen, get the kid, and then in 6 months, we send him to boarding school. She'll be too broke to fight it. We'll break her spirit, and you'll save $3,000 a month. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. Vance stood up, his face red. This is absurd. This is a paid lie. I have never said such things. I have a recording, Elena said softly. Vance froze. In my state, David Russo said, his voice ringing out with newfound confidence. It is a one-party consent state for recordings. Ms. Rosales, did you record this conversation? Yes, Elena said. I was recording my hours on my phone, voice memo, because they kept shorting my pay. I left the phone on the counter when I went to the kitchen. It recorded everything. I have the audio file here, Your Honor, David said, holding up a USB drive. Vance looked like he had been slapped. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I demand a recess to review this. Sit down, Mr. Vance, Calloway roared. It was a sound that shook the walls. Bailiff, take the drive. Play it. Now. Vance sank into his chair. For the first time, the shark looked like the bait. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Miller, no relation to Greg, took the USB drive with the reverence of someone handling a loaded weapon. He plugged it into the court's AV laptop. The large monitors mounted on the walls flickered to life, showing a generic media player interface. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Neera held her breath, her hand gripping David so hard her fingernails dug into his skin. Across the aisle, Samuel Vance was no longer leaning back. He was rigid, his face a mask of tight, controlled panic. Greg was sweating profusely, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. Play it, Judge Calloway ordered. Her pen was poised over her notebook. A hiss of static filled the room, followed by the clinking of ice in glass. Then, Samuel Vance's voice boomed through the speakers. It was unmistakable, rich, arrogant, and slurred with expensive scotch. Relax, Greg. Stop wringing your hands. It's pathetic. But she's fighting back, came Greg's voice, whining, and she has a lawyer. Vance's laugh on the recording was a dark, wet sound. A legal aid lawyer? Please, I eat those bleeding hearts for breakfast. Look, the strategy is simple. We don't attack the mother. We attack the zip code. We make the judge think that leaving the kid there is a death sentence. But Neera is a good mum, Greg's voice said, sounding hesitant. I mean, she takes care of him. I don't want to pay that $3,000 a month, Samuel. The arrears are killing me. I need that money for the payments on the Sea Ray. Neera gasped. The gallery murmured. The Sea Ray. A boat. He wanted to take her son away to buy a boat. You'll get your boat, Vance's voice assured him. Here's the playbook. We provoke her. We belittle her job. We call her family thugs. We push her until she snaps in court. The angry black woman trope works every time, Greg. It's a classic because judges, even the liberal ones, are terrified of the ghetto element. We scare them into giving us the kid." "And then what?" Greg asked. "I can't actually raise Malik. Sheila, my fiancée, she hates kids. She'll leave me." "That's the beauty of it," Vance said, the sound of him sipping his drink audible. "Once we win full custody, the child support stops. You have the kid for, what, 3 months? 6? Then we file a motion that the boy is acting out due to his previous trauma. We ship him off to that military academy upstate. You pay the tuition, which is half the cost of the child support, and you look like a hero trying to reform a troubled youth. The mother will be too broke to fight it. You win, she loses, and the kid is out of your hair." Neera felt a sob rip through her throat. It wasn't just greed. It was evil. It was a calculated dismantling of her son's life. But the recording wasn't done. "What about the judge?" Greg asked on the tape. "Calloway. She's tough." Vance scoffed. "Calloway? Please. She's a diversity hire. She's been on the bench too long. She's soft. She tries to act like the matriarch of justice, but she's just an old woman who got lucky. I'll wrap her around my finger. I'll quote a few statutes, flash the Vance smile, and treat her like the help. She'll be so busy trying to prove she's impartial that she'll rule against her own people just to look objective. Watch." The audio ended with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Every eye in the room slowly turned to the bench. Judge Beatrice Calloway was not moving. She was staring at the laptop screen, her face completely devoid of expression. But the air around her seemed to vibrate. The stenographer had stopped typing, her mouth agape. Samuel Vance stood up. His movements were jerky, lacking their usual grace. He adjusted his tie, his face a mottled red. "Your Honor," Vance said, his voice cracking slightly. I object. This is clearly a doctored recording. Deepfake technology is rampant these days. This is a fabrication designed to slander me and prejudice this court." "Doctored?" Judge Calloway repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried to the back of the room. "Yes," Vance said, trying to regain his footing. He pointed a shaking finger at Elena Rosales, who was still on the stand. "This woman is a fired employee with a vendetta. She has fabricated this evidence. I move to have it stricken and the witness held in contempt." "Mr. Vance," Calloway said. She took off her glasses and set them down on the mahogany surface. "I have heard your voice in this courthouse for 20 years. I know your cadence. I know your laugh. And I certainly know your opinion of my diversity status. Your Honor, I never—" "Sit down!" Calloway didn't shout, but the command hit Vance like a physical blow. He fell back into his chair. Greg Miller looked like he was about to vomit. He stood up abruptly. "It was him. It was his idea. I just wanted the payments lowered. He told me this was the only way." "Shut up, you idiot!" Vance hissed at his client, grabbing his arm. "Mr. Miller, sit down before I have you shackled," Calloway said calmly. She turned her gaze to David Russo. "Mr. Russo, do you have the metadata for this file?" "Yes, Your Honor," David said, handing up a folder. "Date and time stamped. It matches the date Mr. Vance billed Mr. Miller for a strategy consultation according to the discovery documents they provided." Calloway flipped through the file. She looked at the billing record. She looked at the timestamp. She looked at Vance. "So," Calloway said, her voice dripping with ice, "you billed your client $400 an hour to conspire to commit fraud upon this court, slander a judicial officer, and conspire to abandon a minor child." Vance stood up again. "I demand a mistrial. This judge is now biased. You cannot preside over this case after hearing that tape. I demand a recusal." It was a Hail Mary pass. He was trying to get Calloway off the bench so he could get a new judge who hadn't heard him call them a diversity hire. Calloway smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. "Oh, Mr. Vance," she said softly, "you don't get off that easy. You don't get to run to another courtroom. You brought this case into my house. You insulted a mother in my house. You insulted the law in my house. And now? Now we are going to clean the house." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted from tense to apocalyptic. The other lawyers waiting for their cases in the gallery were texting furiously on their phones. This was history in the making. Judge Calloway picked up her gavel. She didn't bang it. She just held it, testing its weight. "For the record," Calloway began, speaking clearly for the court reporter. "The motion for recusal is denied. The bias here was not brought by the court, but introduced by the counsel's own admissions of malice. We will proceed." She turned her eyes to Neera. For the first time, her expression softened. "Miss Thompson," Calloway said, "I apologize." Neera blinked, stunned. "Your Honor?" "I apologize that this court allowed a man to use this room to bully you. I apologize that you had to sit there and listen to your life be dissected by someone who sees you as nothing more than a stereotype." Neera felt a tear roll down her cheek. "Thank you, Your Honor." Calloway's gaze snapped back to the defense table. The softness vanished. "Mr. Miller," she addressed Greg, "you wanted to buy a boat. You wanted to abandon your son to a military academy to save money. You have admitted this in open court just now by blaming your counsel." I, Greg stammered. "Effective immediately," Calloway ruled, her voice ringing out. "I am granting full legal and physical custody of Malik Thompson to his mother, Neera Thompson. Mr. Miller, your visitation rights are hereby suspended, pending a full psychological evaluation and a parenting competency assessment. You will not see that boy until you prove you are not a danger to his emotional well-being." "But," Greg started. "Furthermore," Calloway continued, talking right over him, "we are going to adjust child support today, based on your financial disclosure of earning $180,000 a year and the fact that you have zero custody overnights, and considering the malice shown. I am ordering the maximum guideline support, plus retroactive payments for the last 4 years, plus legal fees." "Legal fees?" Vance croaked. "Oh, I'm getting to you, Samuel," Calloway said. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. Vance looked small. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a sweaty, frightened man in a $3,000 suit. "Mr. Vance," Calloway said, "you referred to me as a diversity hire and the help. You can think what you want of me. I have thick skin. But what I cannot abide, and what the Bar Association cannot abide, is a lawyer who knowingly advises a client to commit fraud. You plotted to deceive the court about the father's intentions. You plotted to manufacture a narrative to strip a child from a loving home for financial gain. It was just talk," Vance whispered. "Locker room talk. We never executed the plan. You filed the motion." Calloway slammed her hand on the desk. "You executed the opening statement. You harassed the witness. You were halfway through the execution." She took a deep breath, composing herself. "Bailiff," she said, "take Mr. Vance into custody." Vance's eyes bulged. "What? You can't arrested me. I'm an officer of the court." "You are in direct criminal contempt of this court," Calloway declared, "for your behavior, for your disrespect, and for the conspiracy revealed on that tape. I am sentencing you to 30 days in the county jail. immediately. 30 days, Vance shrieked. I have a gala on Saturday. I have other clients. They will have to find other counsel, Calloway said, and frankly they should, because I am also referring this entire transcript and the audio evidence to the State Bar Association with a formal recommendation for your disbarment. The color drained from Vance's face completely. Disbarment was death. It was the end of the country clubs, the Italian shoes, the power. You can't do this, Vance stammered as the bailiff approached him, unclipping handcuffs from his belt. Do you know who I am? My father built this courthouse. And his son disgraced it, Calloway said coldly. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. Vance, the man who had sneered at Neera's poverty, was now being manhandled by the bailiff. Turn around, the bailiff said, spinning Vance around. Wait, Vance yelled. Greg, tell her I was just following your orders. Greg Miller shrank away, looking at the floor. I don't know you, Greg mumbled. Karma, David Russo whispered to Neera. Watch it work. But Judge Calloway wasn't finished. One more thing, she said, stopping the bailiff before he could drag Vance out. Mr. Vance, in that recording, you mentioned that this strategy works every time. You implied a pattern of using racial bias to win custody cases against minority mothers. Vance didn't answer. He was breathing hard, panic in his eyes. This court is hereby ordering a special independent review of every custody case you have won in this county in the last 10 years, Calloway announced. The gallery gasped. If we find that you have used these tactics to displace other children from their mothers for profit, you won't just be facing the Bar Association. You will be facing the district attorney for racketeering and fraud. Vance's knees buckled. He actually slumped, the bailiff having to hold him up. Get him out of my sight, Calloway said, waving her hand. As Vance was dragged out the side door, kicking and shouting about his rights, Neera looked at him. Their eyes met for a split second. He looked for fear in her eyes, but he found none. He only found pity. Judge Calloway turned back to the room. She looked at Neera and smiled warmly. Ms. Thompson, you are a credit to your son. Go home. Hug him. And expect that check from Mr. Miller by the 1st of the month. If it's 1 day late, call me directly. Thank you, Judge, Neera wept. Court is adjourned. Calloway banged the gavel. It was a sound of finality, a sound of justice. Neera stood up. Her legs were shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. She hugged David Russo, burying her face in his shoulder. We did it, she sobbed. You did it, David said. You stood tall. But as they walked out of the courtroom, into the bright hallway where the press was already beginning to gather, tipped off by someone regarding the arrest of the city's highest-profile lawyer, Neera realized the story wasn't over. Samuel Vance was a vengeful man. He had powerful friends, and 30 days in jail gives a man a lot of time to think about revenge. Neera walked toward the elevator, feeling lighter than she had in years. But as the elevator doors opened, a tall man in a trench coat stepped out, blocking her path. He wasn't a lawyer. He held a camera. Ms. Thompson, he asked. I'm with the City Chronicle. Is it true that Samuel Vance just got arrested? We heard he threatened you. Neera looked at David. David nodded. Yes, Neera said, her voice finding a new steel. He tried to break me. He failed. The flash of the camera went off. Neera Thompson was no longer just a victim. She was the woman who took down the giant. But giants don't die easily. And Samuel Vance had one card left to play, a card hidden in the files of his old cases, a secret that connected him to someone very powerful, someone who wouldn't want Vance talking to the district attorney. The holding cell at the county jail did not smell like mahogany or old money. It smelled of bleach, unwashed bodies and despair. Samuel Vance sat on a metal bench bolted to the concrete floor, his knees pulled up to his chest. His pinstripe suit, once his armor, was now wrinkled and stripped of its accessories. They had taken his belt, his shoelaces, his tie, and his platinum watch. He looked like a king dethroned, but in his mind he was still negotiating. "Hey!" he barked at the guard passing by. "I demanded my phone call an hour ago. Do you know who represents the sheriff's union?" "My firm does." "If I don't get that phone, you'll be directing traffic in the rain for the rest of your career." The guard, a young man named Officer Hernandez, stopped. He looked Vance up and down through the bars. He didn't look intimidated. He looked amused. "Your firm?" Hernandez asked. "You mean Vance, Eldridge and Moore? I just saw the news in the break room. They're scraping your name off the glass doors as we speak." Vance felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "That's impossible. I am the senior partner. I own 30% of the equity." "Not anymore, buddy," Hernandez chuckled, sliding a newspaper through the slot. "Check the headlines. Racist attorney jailed. Firm implodes." "Your partners voted you out via emergency clause about 20 minutes after the judge banged that gavel. Moral turpitude clause. You're out, you're broke, and nobody is picking up your calls." Vance grabbed the paper with trembling hands. There it was. His face, distorted in anger from a paparazzi shot taken years ago, next to a photo of Neera Thompson, looking dignified and tearful. The headline read, "Judgment Day." He crumpled the paper. This couldn't be happening. He needed to call Adrian Eldridge. Adrian was his mentor, his godfather. Adrian would fix this. "Give me the phone," Vance hissed. "Now." Hernandez shrugged and unlocked the slot to pass him the receiver on the wall. "Make it count. You got 5 minutes." Vance dialed the private number he knew by heart. It rang once, twice. Then a click. "Adrian!" Vance shouted. "Adrian, thank God! You have to get down here! That Judge Calloway, she's gone rogue! She's—" "Samuel!" Adrian Eldridge's voice was not warm. It was like a tomb door closing. "Do not call this number again." "What?" "Adrian, listen to me. It's a setup. The maid was lying. The tape is viral, Samuel." Adrian cut him off. "It has 3 million views in 2 hours. You didn't just insult a mother. You insulted the system. You bragged about buying judges. Do you have any idea the exposure you've caused us? Every case we've won in the last 5 years is being reopened. The feds just subpoenaed our servers." "I can fix it," Vance pleaded, sweat dripping down his nose. "I have files on the mayor. I have files on Judge Calloway's son. We can blackmail our way out." There was a silence on the line, a heavy, pregnant silence. "That," Adrian said quietly, "is exactly why we are cutting you loose. You are a cancer, Samuel, and we are the surgery. The partnership agreement is clear. You are terminated for cause. Your equity is seized to cover potential malpractice suits. You have nothing." "Adrian, please, I can't stay in here. The people in here, they know who I am. Goodbye, Samuel." The line went dead. Vance stared at the receiver. He tapped the button frantically, but there was no dial tone. He was alone. Suddenly, a voice came from the cell across the hallway. A low, gravelly voice. "Yo, Vance." Samuel looked up. In the shadows of the opposite cell sat a massive man with tattoos climbing up his neck. Vance squinted. The face looked vaguely familiar. "You don't remember me, do you?" the man said, standing up and gripping the bars. I don't associate with criminals," Vance stammered. "You made me one," the man said. 5 years ago, State versus Marcus King. You were the prosecutor back then, before you went private. You buried evidence that proved I was at work during the robbery. You wanted a conviction for your record so you could run for office. I did 5 years because of you. I lost my wife. I lost my kids." Vance backed away until his back hit the cold cinder block wall. That was strictly business. I was doing my job." "Your job?" Marcus King laughed, a terrifying sound. "Well, looks like you're out of a job now. And word is spreading on the block that the king of the courtroom is in the general population. You better hope they keep you in solitary, lawyer man, because if you come out to the yard, the karma line is long." Vance slid down the wall, curling into a ball. For the first time in his 50 years of life, Samuel Vance wept, not for the people he hurt, but for the terrifying realization that his money could no longer build a wall between him and the consequences of his actions. While Samuel Vance was rotting in a cell, Neera Thompson was trying to navigate a world that had suddenly turned its blinding lights on her. She sat in her small living room in the Lower East Side. It was a humble apartment, clean but worn. The couch had a blanket thrown over the frayed armrest, but today the room was filled with flowers, bouquets from strangers, from women's shelters, from legal aid organizations across the country. David Russo sat on a folding chair, scrolling through his tablet. He looked exhausted, but exhilarated. "You're trending, Neera," David said, shaking his head in disbelief. "#1 on Twitter, #1 on YouTube. The clip of Judge Calloway shutting him down has been shared by Oprah, by the Vice President. You're a hero." "I'm not a hero," Neera said, pouring tea for them. Her hands were still steady, but her eyes were tired. "I'm just a mum who wanted her son." "That's exactly why you're a hero," David insisted. "Do you know how many women have been bulldozed by guys like Vance? Guys who use big words and expensive suits to make good mothers feel like dirt? You stood up. You took the hit." There was a knock at the door. It wasn't the tentative knock of a neighbor. It was the rhythmic, authoritative knock of the press. "Don't answer it," David said. "I'll handle the statement later. We need to focus on the next step." "The next step?" Neera asked. "I have custody. Vance is in jail. Isn't it over?" David put the tablet down. His face grew serious. "Neera, Vance is a symptom. The disease is the system he exploited. Judge Calloway called me this morning. She's appointed a special master to review Vance's old cases. They need witnesses. They need people who were crushed by him to come forward. And they want you to be the face of the movement." Neera looked at Malik's bedroom door. He was sleeping soundly, unaware that his mother was the most famous woman in the city. "If I do this," Neera said, "will it hurt Malik? Will they come after us?" "They're already coming," David said. "But if we stay silent, Vance's friends, the ones not in jail yet, will spin the story. They'll say you were a fluke. They'll say the judge was biased. We have to control the narrative." Neera took a deep breath. She thought about the sneer on Vance's face when he called her neighborhood a breeding ground for failure. She thought about the mothers who didn't have a Judge Calloway or a secret recording. "Okay," Neera said. "I'll do it. But I want to do it my way. No scripted speeches. No teleprompters." 2 hours later, Neera Thompson walked out of her apartment building. A sea of microphones and cameras awaited her. The flashbulbs were blinding. She stood on the stoop, wearing jeans and a simple sweater. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a mountain that had weathered a storm. "Miss Thompson! Miss Thompson! How do you feel about Samuel Vance's arrest?" a reporter from CNN shouted. "Miss Thompson! Is it true you're suing the city?" Another yelled. Neera raised her hand. The crowd quieted down. Her voice was soft, but the microphones caught every syllable. "I don't care about Samuel Vance," Neera began. "He is a small man who thought his money made him big. What I care about is the fact that for 4 years I was told I wasn't enough. I was told my job wasn't enough. My home wasn't enough. I was made to feel that being poor was a crime." She looked directly into the camera lens, her gaze piercing through the screens of millions of viewers. "There are thousands of Samuel Vances out there," she continued, "lawyers who use race and class as weapons in family court. They weaponize our struggle. They take our children, not because we are bad parents, but because we are broke parents. Today, the judge stopped one of them. Tomorrow, we stop the rest." The clip of that speech hit the internet like a bomb. The response was instantaneous. A GoFundMe page, set up by a stranger for Malik's education fund, hit $200,000 in 4 hours. But more importantly, the phone lines at the district attorney's office began to crash. Victims were calling. "My name is Sarah, and Samuel Vance took my daughter in 2019 using a fake psych evaluation. My name is David, and Vance hid assets, so my wife got nothing. My name is Maria." The floodgates had opened. The avalanche David had predicted was happening. But the biggest twist was yet to come. That evening, as Neera was finally locking her door, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, she wouldn't answer, but something told her to pick up. "Hello? Ms. Thompson?" The voice was female, cultured, and trembling with age. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," the voice said. Neera froze. "Vance, are you—" "I am Samuel's mother," the woman said. Neera's grip tightened on the phone. "If you're calling to threaten me—" "No," Eleanor interrupted. Her voice broke. "I am calling to thank you." Neera was stunned into silence. "My son," Eleanor continued, her voice heavy with a lifetime of regret. "He has been a monster for a long time. I tried to stop him. I tried to cut him off. But his father created him. I have watched him destroy lives for 30 years from the sidelines. Too cowardly to speak. But watching you today, watching you stand up to him, you gave me courage." "Why are you telling me this?" Neera asked, bewildered. "Because I have something you need," Eleanor said. "The police are looking for his financial records, but they won't find the real ones. Samuel is smart. He keeps the dirty files, the bribes, the payoffs to the other judges, in a safe deposit box that isn't in his name. It's in mine." Neera's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the smoking gun. This was the evidence that wouldn't just disbar Vance, but would put him away for life. "Why would you give this to me?" Neera whispered. "Because," Eleanor said, weeping now, "I want to be a grandmother to my other grandchildren, the ones he keeps away from me, the ones he corrupted. I want the Vance name to end with him. I'm sending the key to your lawyer, Mr. Russo. End it, Ms. Thompson. End it all." The line clicked dead. Neera stared at the phone. She looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Samuel Vance was sleeping on a metal cot, thinking he could still plea bargain his way out. He thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize his own mother had just flipped the board. The package arrived at David Russo's office the next morning. A velvet box containing a single brass key and a note from Eleanor Vance. "Bank of America, Box 404, buried deep. Burn it all down." 2 hours later, inside the bank vault, David turned the key. Inside were no diamonds or cash, only black leather ledgers. David opened the first one, his eyes widening. "Dear God, it's a map of corruption. Payoffs to zoning commissioners, bribes to police captains, kickbacks to judges. Vance wasn't just a lawyer, he was the bagman for the city's elite." The fallout was nuclear. Within 48 hours, the ledgers were in FBI hands. The local district attorney was forced to recuse himself as federal agents swarmed the courthouse. Every hour brought a new arrest, but at the center of the web sat Samuel Vance. 6 months later, the trial of the United States versus Samuel Vance began. But the man in the courtroom wasn't the shark in the Italian suit. Vance was shuffled in, wearing an oversized orange jumpsuit, his silver hair stringy and thinning. He had lost 30 pounds in protective custody. The gallery was packed, not with admirers, but with the hundreds of families he had destroyed. A stern federal judge presided. When allowed to speak, Vance's voice was a pathetic rasp. I was just playing the game. Everyone does it. Why am I the villain?" The judge leaned forward, removing his glasses. "Mr. Vance, you didn't play a game. You rigged it against the most vulnerable. You monetized the destruction of families. You looked at a mother's love and saw a profit margin." The courtroom held its breath. Samuel P. Vance, on counts of racketeering, wire fraud, and judicial corruption, I sentence you to 45 years in a federal penitentiary, without the possibility of parole. Vance gasped. He was 50. He would die in a concrete box. As the marshals grabbed him, he turned to the gallery, searching for sympathy. His eyes landed on Neera Thompson. She didn't smile. She didn't jeer. She simply nodded. Vance let out a wail of pure regret as he was dragged through the doors, leaving his life of luxury behind for a 608 cell. 2 years later. The sun shone brightly on the city park. Neera sat on a bench, watching 8-year-old Malik chase a soccer ball, his laughter ringing in the air. "He's fast," David Russo said, sitting down beside her. He looked sharp. His career had skyrocketed after the Vance case. "He gets it from me," Neera laughed. "I saw your name on the dean's list again," David said, handing her a coffee. Neera took the cup. She was in her 2nd year of law school, on a full scholarship funded by the seized assets of Vance's dissolved firm. "I have to keep up. There are a lot of people out there who need a voice." "You're already their voice, Neera." Neera looked at the skyline. It no longer looked like a fortress built to keep her out. It was a place she was helping to rebuild. She thought of Vance, rotting in prison, and then looked at her son, safe and happy. Karma hadn't just punished the wicked, it had liberated the good. "Come on," Neera said, standing up. "I have a torts exam tomorrow, and I plan to get an A." They walked toward the playground together, leaving the shadows behind them, stepping fully into the light. In the end, Samuel Vance learned the hardest lesson of all. Arrogance is a loan, and eventually, karma comes to collect with interest. He thought his money could buy him immunity, but he underestimated the power of a mother's love and the integrity of a judge who remembered her oath. Neera Thompson didn't just win a court case. She dismantled a corrupt empire and proved that dignity has nothing to do with your bank account. It's a reminder that no matter how tall the giant stands, the truth is always the stone that brings them down. Greg lost his family, Vance lost his freedom, and Neera gained a future she creates on her own terms. It serves them right. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it arrives with a sledgehammer. Wow, what a journey. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And here is my question for you guys. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to use their money or status to belittle you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a dose of karma. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.